Professor Curious Man, it's me, the Giga Chad you once knew as Andy Velasco. You thought death would stop my reign of terror, but alas, death is only a stepping stone for the likes of me. I could
One thing that's great about video games is how the greatest game of a franchise isn't even a part of that franchise but surpasses every attempt that the franchise has made. Thus, I introduce to you Ghosthunter, the best Ghostbusters game. Ghosthunter was released in 2003 by Sony Computer Entertainment Cambridge Studio and came out around December. You might ask yourself why a game about ghosts came out just before Christmas, and the answer to that is, I haven't the faintest fucking idea. To be fair though, in around the 1800s, Halloween and Christmas were basically the same thing, which is why you had stories like A Christmas Carol with horror elements. So, hell, it's not completely off the mark in that sense, but it's a few centuries out. The game was later ported to North America in August 2004 by Namco and was ported by Japan by Electronic Arts Vector in September 2004. I can't help but find it funny that a Japanese company published it in the US and an American company published it in Japan. Like, that's insane to me. Anyway, the game revolves around its protagonist, Lazarus Jones, yes, that's his name, who is voiced by Rob Paulson. You may remember Rob Paulson from my But Ugly Martians review about a year ago, and this game was actually the next thing I reviewed after I finished my But Ugly Martians binge-a-thon, and it started to feel like Rob was stalking me at that point. Other notable members of the cast were Joe Morton, Fred Tatasciore, because it's a thing that exists on a screen, so obviously he's in it, Veronica Hart, respected porn actress, and most famous of all, Michael Gambon as Hawksmoor. Long-time viewers, all two of you, may remember me talking about Ghosthunter in a PS2 promo video based around it 3 years ago. The promo video was silly and had little to do with the full game, but did use it as a centerpiece as its main source of inspiration. I sadly learned that Billy Roberts, the sidekick from that video, died last year. That combined with Michael Gambon passing around the time that I finished wrapping up getting the footage of this video made me want to finish this thing for last October, but obviously that didn't work out, so eventually 4 months worth of grafting and I finally get it out there. This video was originally aimed for October 2022, then it got held off for an entire year for October 2023. That didn't work out, so now I've just taken everything that I've got for it, and I'm basically going to put it out as soon as I've finished it, which I believe will be February 2024. One of the main things that caught me by surprise is that this game is very, very long. It's longer than I expected, and it's possibly one of the longest games I've covered for the show. I really like that, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't really what I was expecting for something from 2003 that was a console-exclusive Sony venture. The premise of Ghosthunter is that Lazarus Jones, a new cop on the beat, arrives at an abandoned high school with his partner Anna Steele. There's apparently a disturbance going on there and they're worried some punks are playing in the condemned school. We learn that the school was condemned after a murder happened on campus. A professor murdered one of his students and then vanished off the face of the earth. No, not me, this is a different professor that did that. There's quite a bit of work gone into the game visually, and I do find it impressive. I do like this era for graphics, as even attempts at realism have to be somewhat stylized to convey that realism. Photogenesis graphics that you get in games like Last of Us, for instance, weren't really doable. Most attempts at them actually looked a hell of a lot worse than stylized stuff. So the closest thing you could get to realism back in the day was something stylized in a realistic manner. If that makes any sense. I understand that that was word salad, but it's the best way I can describe it, and I'm sure some people are kinda getting what I mean there. Looking at Kane and Lynch again, the characters and environments are just boring old realistic. Not much imagination really goes into this whole realism angle that they started to go for about 5 years after. This game, however, 5 years prior, there wasn't really a set standard, everyone kind of had to create their own. And this is where I particularly find interesting gaming, because this was when everything kind of had to be different, because there was no alternative. Both Lazarus and his partner are the most early 2000s looking characters I've seen. Lazarus even wears goggles and has a chin scruff beard. It's like the most early 2000s male protagonist appearance possible. His partner is wearing a crop top and has a sort of Heather from Silent Hill 3 thing going on. I just adore it. Anyway, after fucking around a bit, he stumbles into a basement and accidentally unleashes a tank full of terror when he opens up a jukebox full of ghosts. This is a makeshift containment unit built by the professor to keep the ghosts in, but Lazarus doesn't know this and accidentally unleashes mass hysteria.
Is this true?
Yes, it's true. This man has no dick.
A computer boots up soon after, which would have been a bit more useful before he unleashed hell on the world, and announces that it needs to boost up backup power. Lazarus reunites with his partner and begins explaining the situation, and I do somewhat appreciate the dialogue in this game. It's far from perfect, but I do appreciate how the characters have consistent traits and a consistent flow in the game, and whilst there's some hijinks and antics, they don't get in the way of the story, and the characters know when to shut up and start taking shit seriously, or when to put levity in a way that stops it from becoming way too serious way too fast.
What the hell's going on?
Jesus, Steele, could you not just...
What have you done down here?
I found something. A machine. Well, it exploded. I just...
Oh, great.
I fell and I hit my head. I don't know. There must have been some sort of gas or something.
What are you talking about? Lazarus? Hey, you okay?
Of course. Yeah, just wish I knew what happened.
Okay, so you left me and then went down to the basement.
Don't move.
A night-like ghost appears over her and Lazarus is quick to draw his weapon but can't get a clear shot before it grabs her and pulls her away. This is the antagonist Hawksmoor, who is an ancient knight. I believe he's meant to be English, which confused me at first as to what he's doing in an American high school until I learned that ghosts kind of live in their own realm. I imagine those realms sort of defy borders and don't necessarily have to reflect their points of origin. Lazarus restores power by shooting a ghostly monster back into a generator and more or less leaves it suffering forever to power up his new ghost lab. I think Hawksmoor should probably take notes on how to be as evil as Lazarus here. Lazarus returns to the computer guy who informs Lazarus he's fucked up, and he needs to fix his fuck up. Lazarus is having none of this and leaves. The player sort of forces him to go into Ghostbuster training, and it's here that you get your equipment. You go around the school and find various ghosts and investigate the murder scenes. Lazarus is trying to find his partner in the abandoned school, hoping he can just blast his way through the ghosts and eventually get her. I do quite like the cinematic camera in this game. It feels like a precursor to more cinematic titles from Sony, but it doesn't feel as bogged down in cutscenes and cinematic story as later games do, like The Last of Us 2 for example. The gameplay style feels like some sort of precursor to Resident Evil 4 with an over-the-shoulder perspective of the character and a locked-in aim mode whenever you shoot. The controls are pretty good once you get used to them, but this is one of those games that feels difficult to pick up again if you haven't played it for a while, as you have to reorient yourself completely, usually through trial by fire. In combat, your job is to more or less weaken the ghost until you can throw your frisbee-like trap at it. I feel like this is a cool way of doing a ghost trap for a video game. It works quite well with the rest of the game, and you feel a sense of satisfaction if you ever get that perfect throw that hits the ghost immediately. but it's not your downfall if you ever miss it. It kind of reminds me of Pokemon, but less annoying because the ghost doesn't ever escape if it gets caught. It's caught, that's the end of it. There's no jumping back out after wiggling a few times as you fucking cry because that was your last master ghost trap. After a while, you find your partner, and it seems Dumbledore's taken a liking to her. He kind of establishes that she can only see him when they are touching, otherwise he is part of the spirit realm, rather than the real world. He keeps insisting that she's the one who freed him, even though it was Lazarus, and Steele even insists that this is the case, but Dumbledore is straight and Steele is hot, so he pretends that he can be her eternal simp. Well, he poses this way, but he very quickly takes control of her and tries to turn her into a puppet of some kind by the second act. It's at this point in the game that I realise that this is one of those where the fuck do I go kind of games, especially in the opening and the first act. The game becomes a lot more linear and makes a lot more sense around the second act, and there's a reason for this, which I'll address in a bit. We go into the bathroom where this sexy ghost meets us, who is a major character and game mechanic. Lazarus is able to summon a friendly ghost by standing on this circle on the ground, and this allows him to astral project, doing some recon and some other things he wouldn't be able to do as a human. The astral projection ghost has several abilities that she accumulates over the course of the game based on ghosts that you've captured, and you use them all at some point or another to solve puzzles and the lark. The issue that I have with this as a thing is that it feels like most of the abilities are only used in the area they are picked up in, and they don't seem to be a thing after a certain point. Only the poltergeist is useful on multiple levels, as it's able to break through objects, but the ghost that can worm its way through tiny holes doesn't seem to have any presence outside of the swamps. The ghost girl is actually an important part of the backstory, as she is the ghost of the professor's assistant, who he allegedly murdered. Her murder and the strange circumstances around it more or less gave her the ability to float around like this, and gave her a unique ghostly lease on life, in quotations. She doesn't talk, and it's established that these ghosts can't talk for some reason, as you find another one like her later in the story, and they have a similar thing going on. So we fight and capture Dumbledore's minions, and he opts to fly away with Officer Steele. The game sends you straight back to the lab, which is something I kind of appreciate, as a lot of games make you backtrack, and I always hate that unnecessary backtracking bullshit, especially when it's just to pad out the overall runtime. In the lab, you get to view the ghosts you've captured, and I do like this as a feature, a sort of rogues gallery that you can examine after capturing a new ghost type. It almost gives the game a Pokemon-esque vibe, but the only problem is that you can only view the ghosts you captured until around halfway through the game, in which point the story takes over and the hub world is more or less inaccessible. The game does feel like it was meant to be bigger and longer, but they were forced to reduce it to this. Maybe because of time or money, but the pacing of the whole ordeal feels a little off regardless. The first mission takes around 2 to 4 hours to complete for most players, and after that they just get shorter and shorter. It also feels like the finale chapters all come at once, and you kinda get locked into the game's story about halfway through. The game's Crash Bandicoot style warp gates lose their usefulness, as Lazarus just exits and leaves them in a cutscene without any player input. Lazarus actually gets to talk to the computer, who explains that the only way he can save his partner is that he needs to capture as many ghosts as he can. This will also help him somewhat redeem himself, because he was the one that let them all loose onto the world to begin with. I do kind of like that he argues with the computer and puts the equipment on mid-conversation, mid-argument point. Like, yeah, I'm not gonna do that, adjusts jacket. You've really got to love early 2000s cutscenes. I really like the animation work in this. Lazarus has some pretty realistic and relatable idle animations where he just kicks his feet around like he's genuinely waiting for something. The animation work in this game is overall really good for the time, and I feel like it holds up in a number of ways. Technical limitations in mind, the game has a lot of detail, and I feel like it's overall well designed, aesthetically speaking. While some of the characters are a little overexpressive at times, they are quite lively and more realistic for the most part, and I feel it adds a lot to the game and is a thing to look back on fondly overall. We arrive at the swamp, which some people might remember from that Ghosthunter promo video, where they compared it to a real swamp which was destroyed by a hurricane. Allegedly, the hurricane was brought on by a witch who died and put a curse on the town, saying she'd take it with her. She apparently sat on her porch day in and out and sang about it as an inevitability. Census records suggest that people who were in the story actually did exist, however the census doesn't exactly prove any of the supernatural shit. What a shame, because it probably should. If I were the American government, I'd want to know who was a witch, in case I need an advantage in war or something. I mean, if this woman can conjure hurricanes, allegedly, she could probably win a battle or two for me, or break up a few hockey fights at the very least. Anyway, after beginning this stage, I take a few steps forward and I hear the worst noise I've ever heard in my entire life. Sounds like an elephant and a pig having the most painful sex imaginable. It took me a bit to wonder what the fuck this was, and I noticed that a Slimer-like ghost is hovering around in the sky. I'm going to assume, based on Billy Roberts' version of the story, that this is Martha from the town of Frenier.
It's quite an elderly woman that died as well. I felt her before and she kept talking about Martha.
Why did you say that name?
So I did a bit of the Googles and found absolutely no references to anyone called Martha in relation to this tragedy. Surprise!
And Martha seems to be, and that's not a German name, I don't think, is it? But she kept talking about Martha, so Martha's connected in some way to this.
Martha, yes.
Do you understand that?
I think that that's possible, that the little girl that survived was Martha.
Oh, I see. This guy was just briefed on the way over there in the car. Or maybe he looked it up the night before.
Because there was 2 survivors in the town of Frenier. An elderly black man grabbed a little girl and got inside one of the railroad boxcars, and he held on as the wind whipped through, and he held on to that little girl and he saved her.
And that elderly black man was Martha.
By the way, I did actually do a bit more research into the whole Frenier thing. I haven't found anyone mention Martha at all. Her existence has never come up in anything but that one video. If you look up this disaster, like Google the disaster and then Martha's name, it's specifically ruled out as to not being mentioned in any of the articles or the census records. He's either the world's greatest psychic who knows something that nobody else does, or the dude kind of fucked up on that one. So after 3 minutes of walking around a closed off area, occasionally being greeted by the worst noise ever, I caved and looked up a walkthrough. Haven't even got an hour into the game and I'm already looking up a walkthrough. You see, this is why people come here, for the pro gameplay. Anyway, it's at this point that I realise that this is a stealth section as well as a tailing section. Fuck, remember tailing missions? I remember tailing missions, I fucking hated them. They were so big in the 2000s and the 2010s, and I don't know who the fuck they appealed to. They were bad enough when they work, but they're worse when they don't, and you have an NPC with eyes in the back of his head, or that can hear a pin drop from 3 continents away. Anyway, I was beginning to suspect that something might have glitched out, so I reloaded my save and went through the portal again. I seemed to have better luck this time around, and the tailing went a lot smoother. After following Gasper the irritating ghost through the graveyard, I eventually advanced to the next area and noticed that there's a little page from a notebook that details the ghost. I like the idea that the professor and other ghost hunters are having to categorize these things as they go, and you see their observations and notes as you make yours. I feel it's something that could have been expanded upon. I don't know, a sequel or some sort of spiritual successor, might actually give us this opportunity to expand further on these ghosts and the types and how they are made and why they exist and shit like that. Not holding out much hope for any of that, but weirder things had happened. Apparently fucking Gex might be coming back. So this creature is referred to as a howler due to its noise. I wonder if it's any way based on the Ozark howler, which isn't a ghost but is a creature that more people claim to have heard than seen. Its cry is apparently akin to a mix of an elk's bulge and a wolf's howl. I believe it's meant to resemble a bear in appearance, but I've also seen people say it's some sort of dog or some horned beast, so who the fuck knows. It also has a regional variant in Australia called Nice Lone Wolf. There's a howler ghost type in Ghostbusters that looks strikingly similar to the creature from this game. And what's kind of weird is that as far as I can tell, it was introduced to a Ghostbusters video game years after this game came out. I couldn't tell you if the idea was lifted or if it was just a coincidence, but there's more drama in saying that it was obviously stolen in an act of industrial espionage. I can't prove that, but I'm gonna say it anyway because this is 2024 and we don't have to prove shit anymore. I eventually reached the courtyard where I had to fight a revenant and a blue spook to get to the howler. Howlers aren't very aggressive or akin to watchdogs, so unlike most of the other ghosts, you don't actually fight it and instead fight its owners. Capturing the howler gives your bath towel donning astral projection gal pal the ability to worm her way into tight spots, whilst also making the worst possible noise known to man. This does sound useful, but it's very particular as to what spots you can worm your way into, and unfortunately it doesn't really get used past the first level. Eventually I come to this pretty swamp house, which looks quite peaceful, and is the first sign of life I encounter in this backward cesspool. One thing about this part of the game that I've seen praised is the soundtrack. There's a really nice bit of banjo playing to give it that proper deep south swampy atmosphere, and I've noticed someone once praised the composer for making a banjo sound sad, which they also assured everyone is really hard to do. I guess this guy's like the Eric Clapton of the banjo. You know what, I might just put that on my CV or business card one day. See if anyone contests it. Oh yeah, I'm the Eric Clapton of the triangle. I can make a triangle sound like it's weeping. Literally no one else can do that. So you get inside and you notice some old faded pictures on the walls, some old fashioned furniture, and it gives off old lady vibes from a bygone age. She also has this little dolly of former Prime Minister David Cameron dressed as Donald Duck. So we're then ambushed by the owner of the house, Lady de Montfort, who is voiced by respected porn actress of the 70s and 80s, Veronica Hart, who has apparently had several roles in movies and video games over the years. It's not completely out there. I mean, Ron Jeremy was in Ghostbusters, but it's just kind of unusual for me to encounter this.
Don't take another step, please, Mr. Fancy Britches.
Okay, you just keep calm, ma'am. I'm a police officer.
A police officer? You're human. How did you get here? And what are you doing snooping around my house? I'll use this gun to defend my virtue, young stranger. Make no mistake about it.
Calm down, you don't need your gun. Why I'm here is... well, it's a long story, ma'am, but basically, I was...
Stupid then, Hanson. Listen, you have to help me. They're coming for the children. You have to do something.
Let's just start from the beginning, can we? Okay, nice and calm. Who exactly...
The spirits! Who do you think? They'll be here any minute. Normally my son can deal with them, but he's been called away. Will you help us? I can see you're a sensitive young man.
Okay, I'll go take a look around. You stay here, please, ma'am. I could maybe use some backup out here. Do you have a phone I could use?
A phone? They'll be here any minute. Backup indeed. Comes in here tramping dirt all over a dignified lady's floor. Phone's in the hallway. No charge.
This cutscene is pretty good, but I do find the tone of the woman to be a bit erratic. You think that's part of the character, but Lazarus does this too in some bits throughout the game's story. The scene direction and writing maybe could have been a bit better. Even a simple reaction or something visual could have made it work a little better in some parts. Like maybe show that it just dawns on her that she can use him. I did kind of find it funny how she constantly implies he's there to have his way with her. Not so much because that's a genuine concern of hers, but it's a means of stroking her own ego and vanity. She also tries to appeal to him, both to manipulate him and make herself feel pretty at the same time. She tells you that you can use the phone, but if you do, the line is broken. I love the little added detail of Lazarus tapping his foot whilst making the call. The computer man calls me to tell me to be careful. Thanks, Diet GLaDOS. I then enter a church where we hear a eulogy of sorts, an echo of a distant past. What's interesting about this eulogy is that the priest ends it by telling everyone to turn to Ezekiel 17:55.
He lost his life fighting for the very beliefs that rule his life. Oh yes, Pete, he will be sorely missed. Sorely missed both by his kinfolk, especially his beloved mother, and by the whole community. His tireless work, his boundless energy. He may not have smiled much, but he did his smiling with his deeds. We will remember him. We will remember him as we turn to page 408, Ezekiel 17:55.
Whenever I hear Bible verses in media that aren't elaborated on, I usually look them up to see their significance. But from what I know of the Bible, it's very rare, if ever, that there are 55 verses in any biblical text. So I wasn't really sure if I'd find anything. This brought me to a GameFAQs thread from 2008 where a user named Crude Dude also wondered about this and decided to email Julian Rex, the lead programmer for the game. Julian responded with, "It was deliberate. You have to be very careful with religious matters in games, so we picked a fictitious verse." I do find this to be a bit overzealous, no pun intended, since I don't think characters in stories specifically referencing a verse is a problem within and of itself, but everyone has their limits, I guess, as to where they want to push the boundaries. I guess you can't really offend anyone by having a fictitious verse in your game that the characters refer to. One thing I couldn't help but think, though this is purely in my head as a sort of headcanon thing, but it makes sense as a good bit of world building. You see, in my eyes, this is an isolationist backwoods swamp community, which I could totally buy that they have their own version of the Bible, that the priests probably wrote themselves and made their own little additions to the original versions of the Bible that only they have. I mean, there'd be no one around to correct them back in the 1800s. A lot of people couldn't read, and you could easily brainwash a small community for long enough that they forget that there was ever a time without those verses. I don't know, it just seemed like a cool addition and a cool in-world version as to why they have different Bible verses than we do. There is actually quite a lot of good world building in general, where you can find newspaper clippings establishing the rise and fall of this little community. I feel like it does a good job of making this place feel real and well fleshed out, beautifully setting the scene for the inevitable haunting that followed it. We then descend into the catacombs, and I gotta say, I love the design of this part of the game. There's a lot of detail and thought crammed into every segment. I feel like this part of the game is them starting as they meant to go on, but I get the impression that at a certain point they realised that there either wasn't enough space on the disc, or money, or budget, or just not enough time within the time frame of development to make the game on the scale that they wanted it to be. Bear in mind, games took approximately a year or two to make back then, so it was very rare that you had a game take longer than that, especially in actual development time. Navigating the catacombs takes me out into the daylight again. Another thing that I love is it's hard to predict where paths will take you in this game. You then have a shootout with these invisible sniper boys who are your first and I believe only living enemies in this entire game. They are kind of annoying to fight, being almost completely invisible, but once you're able to find them or make them reveal themselves, you just blast them and then they fall down. We then encounter... what the fuck is that? Oh, it's just Leatherhead with a chainsaw. Silly me, what did I think it was gonna be? After 10,000 shots I killed it and was able to move on to the next nightmare that was waiting for me. We then find a printing press with a newspaper clipping series that tells us the events of how a girl named Jessie Planter went missing, and the villagers took a long ass time to find her. I sense some foreshadowing. We also find out that the mine has been condemned because the guy who owned it kicked the bucket. People are kind of bummed about that because that was their only source of income and the only lifeblood of the town. We can piece together that the funeral we overheard was likely his, and the spiritual unrest in the region is likely brought upon the deaths leading up to the demise of the town, which was killed off with a dam being built just outside it. I get inside one of the buildings and trigger a town meeting by shooting a large bell. The meeting is unfortunately bogged down by the game struggling to run it. I believe it's likely an emulator issue, for which I can only apologise. I assume it's the vast number of sprites on screen at the same time that causes the mayor to sound like the town drunk.
People, we have no choice. The decision has been made.
I do have a walkthrough from YouTube I can show in its place.
People, we have no choice. The decision has been made. Whatever you may think, Oakville is regarded as a ghost town. Let's face it is a ghost town these days. Wake up to reality. Whole families have left, businesses have closed down. The time has come to admit defeat. My friends, a town without children is a town without a future. Sad as it is, Oakville can linger as a memorial for the dear people we have lost.
We have to fight our way through a bit more of the swamp. There's quite a lot of cool environmental stuff which really adds some flavour to the place, as well as a few great fights that you end up getting pulled into. My biggest gripe with the whole thing is just the amount of backtracking I ended up doing, because it really turns into one of those where the fuck do I go kind of games, as the angry video game nerd calls them. This is the worst level for it, but the way forward wasn't always clear to me, and I ended up doubling back hoping to find something I'd missed, hoping that I'd be able to move forward after a bit. I then arrive at a junk fort. I do love the aesthetic of this place, it's a shame it's not that big of a thing. I then meet a freaky crocodile creature in a dress and a chainsaw. I'm glad that my nightmares now have a new cast member. Then there's this cool puzzle where you have to shoot pieces of metal hanging from a ceiling but in the right order so that the noise they make creates the corresponding tune. I kind of like this, it's quite an inventive thing. As a reward for my puzzle solving skills, a fucking beholder like teeth monster jumps out of the ground and tries to kill me. Great. After a bit more exploring, I'm knocked out and kidnapped by the target audience of a PureFlix film. Fuck.
Don't look much, does he? He's nothing but a scrawny little city boy. Give him to me, Pa. Let me have him, Pa, please. Stow it, Junior. Pa's trying to think. Ain't you, Pa? Ain't that right, Pa? You're trying to think. Shut up, both of you. Oh, it ain't fair. I was never gonna have no fun. Tell him, Pa. It must be my turn now. It's my turn, Junior. If you had a brain in that fat head of yours, you'd remember that there fact of the matter. Pair you bedwetting jackasses, just keep quiet. Look, he's coming round. Well, howdy, Slicker. You ran us a merry little jig, no mistake about that. It's what you doing at the edge of the civilized world. Consorting with that there de Montfort hag?
Look, I don't know who or what you people are. All I know is you're in a lot of trouble. You've been accused of attempted kidnapping. You've just assaulted a police officer, and if you don't release me right away, I'll be happy to add holding a hostage to the list.
A lawman? Well, That just about seals it. No way we're letting you go now. Law's never done us folks any favors. Just take that right there off your hands. Dainty little pink girly hands that they are. Supper for the crawfish, that's all you are now, boy.
Wait a minute. Will you guys just wait?
Time to get what's coming to you. Okay, Billy boy. Yes, Pa. Step aside. Junior, he's all yours.
Oh, you get all the fun.
Thanks, Pa.
Thankfully, these inbred fuckwits left a hole in my cell that a fully grown man could just walk through. I summoned my ghost girl and sent her through to the point that she finds the throne room of King Inbred Fuckwit. By the way, in this scene it occurs to me that she has elf ears. Was she an elf before she died, or do you get those when you become a ghost? I'm not a paranormal expert, so I don't know. In this cutscene, it's established that the professor intends to put this girl back into her body. This is something I forgot between this point and beating the game, as he never actually upholds that promise as far as I can remember. In fact, this girl kind of becomes an afterthought towards the end of the game, as things just get a bit more chaotic. One thing that I do like about this is it drops you off at the house, albeit it is a scene change entirely with the house being at night now, but I appreciate not having to fucking backtrack again, like some other games would make you do. I understand that I've said this before, but I can't emphasize just how annoying it can get just having to walk all the way back from where you came from. Huh, this lady has a shelf full of creepy doll babies too. I thought that was just a me thing. We then find this creepy fucking ghost girl in the basement. Thankfully, she's just playing with her teddy bear. Nothing threatening about that. Oh, me and my big fucking mouth. Shit, man, it even uses the little girl as a weapon. Fantastic. A monster after my own heart. There's a lot of really well detailed rooms in this game like this, and it's kind of crazy to me because they're only in the game for a few seconds, but someone must have spent quite a bit of time and effort constructing all of this. We then arrive in this mindfuck. We then end up in this mannequin room, which gives me John Lawson house vibes whenever I look at it. So, in Hamburg, New York, there was allegedly a group of mannequins that hung out at this house, and they apparently changed pose, outfits, and found new objects to play with all the time. Apparently they were seen with old plastic milk containers, an empty birdcage, toolboxes, several books, some of which had cryptic clues in them about past events in the area. Nobody claims to have seen these mannequins being moved by a person. It was like they were alive or something. I personally reckon they were just moved around at like 3 AM when no one was about to see them, but that's just my theory. My guess is this is like some sort of early aspiring Banksy type, decades before Banksy was even a thing. Honestly, it's the sort of thing I'd do if I had the time. So, you need to catch Jerry with his trousers down here. The problem is that Jerry can jump through the walls and you can't. I usually find that a bit of a limiting tidbit. Kuma from Tekken? What are you doing here? Anyway, I spent 20 minutes or so trying to shoot this child. I'd ask when I became this, but in the next up-and-coming episode, I'll be smashing a kid's face repeatedly into concrete. I mean, I don't know, what will the future hold? I eventually worked out how to get between them. You basically have to make them go back to the previous room and then use the doors, which basically teleports you back to the beginning of the area to find them again. Then she gives up and runs away because jumping back into the other room was too much work. I'm glad, because being stuck in a never-ending corridor of plastic babies and Christmas wasn't exactly how I planned to spend eternity. She threw her terrifying teddy bear monster at me, but by now I'm well versed in taking these fuckers down, so it didn't take much to kill it. I then arrive in this weird room with a tree growing out the middle of it. After murdering another child, I find a bathroom that has a tree growing out of the bathtub. That can't be good for the plumbing. I headed outside where there's more teddy bears awaiting me. I gunned them the fuck down as well. This haunted mansion has a really cool aesthetic to it and a lot of detailing. I actually really appreciate having things to look around at and just admiring the weirdness and creepiness and surrealism of it all. The soundtrack also adds to this, as well as the overall sound design. It builds up an atmosphere as well. This is definitely a game with a vibe. It's a game that triggers a feeling inside of me that's genuinely quite unique to this game. I know that they get a lot of shit, but Bethesda's earlier projects like Oblivion, Morrowind, and Fallout 3 did this for me as well. Timesplitter's Future Perfect is one of the few games that every level just has its own vibe, which I definitely appreciate about that game. It's why it's one of my favourites of all time. It honestly helps with immersion and creating a unique world for the player. It's the difference between a game that you play and move on from and something that stays with you. I then end up in this bit and it made me want to rip my own face off and eat it in frustration. It's like a longer version of the Plastic Baby corridor of hell, but now it's a wine cellar of hell that you end up looping around forever. I also don't drink wine, so there's literally nothing fun here for me. After making a few rounds, the bitch leaps up through the ceiling and the objective is to basically stop her. I had no idea how this worked and had to look up a walkthrough. Honestly, this is a game that I feel like a walkthrough is almost essential for it. Even rewatching the footage a while after playing the game, I still wasn't sure what the solution was until I actually got to it in the video, and even some of these where I actually did it, I don't know how I pulled that off. Now, I know that me getting stuck at places like this contributed to the length of this footage being eternal, but I swear to Christ that this segment is the longest in the game. In most walkthroughs I've seen, the first mission takes about 4 hours for people to beat, and the later missions take less and less time from then on out. There's a multitude of factors as to why this is the case, such as not knowing entirely what you're doing in the first parts of the game. And I also believe that the game becomes a lot more streamlined and the segments become a lot simpler and shorter. I'm not sure that this is by choice from the developers per se, but rather a design necessity, as I do think that all of the following levels being as long as the swamp segment would have resulted in a 20-hour long game, maybe even longer than that. Now, that might not seem like an overwhelming amount of time for some genres, but bear in mind this was on the PS2 in 2003 and it wasn't an RPG. They had to contend with things like save game size and disk space size, and as well as the ability of the console to be able to even run the thing. There was no saving to internal storage or any other potential crutches. That was what PS3 and onwards had. You couldn't install to the hard drive to make the game go faster. So if the game was too powerful for the system, that was basically a game-breaking design flaw. To be honest though, I do feel like this is a bit of a blessing. The swamp, admittedly, whilst I really enjoyed a lot of aspects about it, was my least favourite segment because after a while it went on forever and constantly gave you this feeling that you didn't know where you were going and you might end up giving up soon. It does have a cool start and there's a lot of great stuff going for it, but after hours of being trapped in it, I never wanted to see it again. Now, this was one of the few segments in the game that watching a walkthrough didn't help me work out what the fuck I'm meant to be doing. I do feel like that's a sign that the game might be a little too annoyingly difficult when you spend half an hour running around in circles, then give up and bite the bullet and look up a walkthrough, only to find that someone literally showing you what to do doesn't seem to help with the problem. After 10,000 years, I finally get the girl to go somewhere else and I'm able to capture her. Thank fuck for that. Now, I do like this part of the level due to the weird and surreal nature of the rooms. Every one is built like a normal 19th century house, but with some really weird shit attached to it. Like this room where tree roots are growing through the windows, or one bit where there's a painting that you can walk through to go to a different part of the level. It really does a good job of giving off this topsy-turvy style of a haunted house, mostly brought into the public's consciousness from the Winchester hauntings. By the way, that is my favourite ghost story of all time. Apparently the guy who invented the Winchester rifle, a rifle you might be familiar with if you've seen Shaun of the Dead or played Red Dead Redemption, was haunted by the angry ghosts of people who were killed with that rifle, as were his descendants. His family blew an absolute fortune on turning the house into a topsy-turvy nightmare to confuse the spirits. They had stairways that went nowhere, furniture stuck to the ceiling, doors that just opened to brick walls. Anyone who's played Fallout 4's Nuka World expansion might be familiar with what I'm talking about, as a house with a very similar backstory was created there for the player to explore. Albeit in that situation, they did sort of cross it over with Lizzie Borden a bit. Now, my favourite part of this story, well, when there's something strange in your neighbourhood, who are you gonna call? If you said 7th President of the United States of America, Andrew Jackson, then you clearly know more about this shit than I do. Apparently Jackson and some other dudes burst into the house to fight the ghosts. Like at the end of an old Hammer horror movie where the villagers just attack the castle and drive the ghosts out. But somehow this didn't really stop the ghosts. But hey, the guy had some balls. I give him some points for trying. I do wonder if this is one of the main inspirations, or maybe the ghost world just sort of looks naturally this way within their little ghost lore. I find a piece of paper which I was able to slot into a painting, re-establishing it as a portal. I love this as an effect and an overall idea, especially in gameplay where it has this cool TARDIS effect on the player. There's also an evil skull pile of hell in one of the lower basement rooms, which is a bit of an inaccuracy on the house's established time period, because people didn't start building these until the late 1960s, and they went out of fashion around the early 1970s, taken over by ugly wallpaper. But hey, I'll let that slide, it's a common misconception. You then end up going into this fucking creepy parlour where a bunch of mannequins are waiting for you, one of which is a bride holding the head of another mannequin. There's also one that appears to be fucking bleeding with an arm missing. I'm not sure if this is trying to tell us the backstory of the town or a character like the old lady maybe, or if this is just the game just trying to fuck with the player. Either is quite believable to me, but I like to think this is the ghosts retelling historical events. It makes it a bit more interesting to me. Again, this is very like the John Lawson house story, and it does make me wonder if this is what they were going for when doing these parts of the game. It could also just be very coincidental, because this is just basic creepy stuff. We find a little ghost girl in a cage who says something about stars shining in the sky, which is a clue of some sort. Looking for an answer, I wander into this room and find a lot of questions. We explore further on and my god, these developers did not believe in the idea of filler. Every room has been properly designed and created to be especially creepy. I fucking love it. There's no half measures when it comes to detailing and creating fantastic appearances for these mansion rooms. We return to the skull pit and something jumps out to meet us. Oh, hello. It's a creepy flesh-rotten abomination on a rocking chair. Lovely, just what I've always wanted. Even something as simple as the creaking on the rocking chair is unsettling. It sounds like a child or animal crying out, and the nonsensical nature of this whole thing just makes it even more unnerving. She's not killable or anything of that nature, she's just there. So after several more minutes of fucking around, I try shining the star setting on my torch at the painting, which creates a moon on it, and this has changed something. I don't know, haunted houses, what can you do? Anyway, this little shit moves the goalpost, and now I have to do something involving when and how she died. Fine, you needy little shit, give me the flashlight. So, this brings us to this puzzle involving a projector. You have to keep pushing it to cycle through the photos. Now, it originally appears to be the case that there's 3 photos on the projector and they go around in a loop. But you then notice that each one changes a little every time you view them. This is actually a really cool concept for a haunted house puzzle, as this child establishes how she died. The problem that I have is that it shows you 11 as a day, and that's about it, you're left with nothing else. So, Around half an hour of playing fuck around and find out, I learned via YouTube walkthrough that I have to shine my flashlight on a lamp, which makes something happen, which advances things. 1187 is the number we have now. Great, now what? To thank me, she attacks me. What a lovely little toe rag. Eventually, I fight my way up to this little girl's bedroom and she leads me out. I was under the impression, up until this point, that the little girl that was taken was going to be a ghost, but thankfully not. This little redneck girl is voiced by Kim My Guest, who voiced Mei Ling in MGS1. On her IMDb, there's a funny quote about her that reads, "On voicing characters for the first time, it was said to me that I was the first woman that they heard that effectively conveyed the process of dying that also didn't sound like I was experiencing some sort of sexual pleasure." Do you know what? That's actually pretty believable given how many death moans I've heard over the years. So, I escape with the brat only to notice that Mrs. Rape Fetish is holding her hostage with a shotgun. Great, it always comes down to this, doesn't it? Was this just like a thing in 2003?
Get your doggy asses into the big machine!
I then get across a walkway and... Great, now what? So then we have to fight this horrific alligator abomination, which I really like the design of as it looks quite creepy. The controls fuck me over and I end up facing the wrong way and have to turn back around again, like a broken Dalek. Anyway, the alligator decides it's not fucking terrifying enough yet and objects to vomit up afterbirth. Not just any afterbirth though, this is the ghost of a dude who it ate once, who was fused to it, and now wears this gator that he double KO'd as one of his arms. This is actually a really fucking cool concept for a monster and a character in general. I said it before in that promo video and I'll say it again here, I adore this. I unfortunately have no fucking clue as to how to fight this monster and had to look it up. I appreciate that I've said that a lot at this point, but it gets better, I promise. Ish. Eventually I realised that there was a note that suggested that I lure this beast to the porches of the house and then encourage him to smash them, to injure both parties and give me an opportunity to attack them both after the big man baby is thawed by the alligator. That's a sentence I just said. Things come full circle as we return to this old churchyard and the alligator returns to fight us. I do love video games like this where the maps are kind of designed to be worlds rather than just a string of levels or sequences. It really fleshes things out and makes it feel more organic. After luring him there, we get to smash up a few statues. Take that, history. At this point, you have to face them in a new way, and I love that this boss has multiple forms and stages. The great animation work helps it stay really organic as well. Honestly, as far as texture work and animation goes, this looks bloody great for an early 2000s PS2 game. You run around taking pot shots at this creature until it succumbs to your bullets, and you can eventually capture it. This results in the end cutscene, which is slightly played for laughs. This guy's punched in the face and basically disowned by his dad. I also love this bit, just out of context.
I guess that leaves you in the clear. There is one thing, though. Time to go.
Good luck, boy. I hope you find the professor. Scrawny little city boy with hands like a messy, and look who's on the floor. You ain't no son of mine, Junior. You sure ain't no son of mine.
I also can't help but notice that this little girl doesn't seem to have a name, like nobody even asks. I wonder if she does have a name in universe, or if she's just referred to as she or little girl. So by this point in the game it feels like I'd played the whole thing, but no, this was like level 1 of 5, which is pretty crazy. I mean, this game's first level is the length of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3's entire campaign. That's the remake, by the way, not the original. After all that, the computer dude tells me that this wasn't in aid of finding my partner, and that my partner was in the school the whole time. This computer dude is a dick, but I kinda like it. He also has some strong character moments that I feel shows that he's either grown, or that there was always more to him throughout the story. Now, after talking to this computer guy, we're able to see the jukebox thing and the ghosts on display. This is a cool feature, but it's overshadowed by the fact that halfway through the game, Laz is just like, nope, no time to talk, I'm on a roll, and he just leaves again. So after the second mission, I believe it is, you don't get to see captured ghosts anymore. So here we have to explore the school some more, and I have to admit, the lighting in this part of the game is so good, and this school is pretty damn big and fun to explore. I eventually reach Anna Steele, who is immediately lured away by Dumbledore. One thing about this scene that I like is that this is where the computer guy actually helps Lazarus rather than talking down to him and deceiving him.
Officer Jones. Officer Jones. Officer Jones, that door is not going to open with the use of brute force.
I know that, smartass, but he's got steel in there. And this is called natural human behavior.
It is called wasting valuable time.
Fine. So is there another way in?
Negative.
You said it.
An impasse. Recommend you continue exploring the school. We need more power.
The two of them have a gradually improving relationship over the course of the game, and I do appreciate it. So then I end up in this library, and this was actually when I stopped playing the game for a bit. Apparently for an entire year, because I'd run out of time for my initial Halloween 2022 deadline and didn't know what the shit to do. When you enter the library, a poltergeist steals all of the stairs and starts throwing things at you. You require a new mechanic to defeat them. Smoke grenades, out of a grenade launcher. You have to find all these things deeper inside the school. I spent ages trying to find this out because I didn't even know smoke grenades were a thing in this game. I think I ran around in circles a fuck ton of times to find something to use here, not realizing that I had it for such a long time. After beating them, there's a librarian ghost who deputizes you and asks you to bring some books back. One of them is a book about the Black Hawk, who is Dumbledore back when he was alive. I do kind of wonder how this librarian woman died in the school. Like, did she die in the school, or did she just decide to come back here after dying at home? Anyway, then a digger gets possessed and brought to life, which is wonderful because I'd run out of things to be fucking afraid of. It's thankfully not that hard to walk around, and when you do, you find a book on the school bus. Now, it kind of annoys me that I have to return the books to the front desk so the woman can give them back to me and I can take them to their little podiums. Could I not just cut out the middleman and put them on the podiums? Glad none of these books belong on a shelf, or that'd make things even harder. When you take the history book back, you are transported to the history itself. In a ghost story, this is actually a pretty cool way of showing off exposition, but the stuff shown here doesn't really amount to that much overall. It is a cool window into the backstory of the antagonist, but not much of this really plays into the rest of the game or the rest of the game's story. Maybe it would have played in a bit more towards like a broader narrative over several games, but this is the only one in the series, so if that was the point, it didn't really work out. It's established that Black Hawk was betrayed by the king, his wife was raped and murdered, and his kids had their throats slit by him. This is some pretty dark shit. I remember a few magazines back in the day saying that this wasn't quite as dark as games like Primal, but honestly this game is pretty damn dark in places. What I love though is how a lot of the darker themes are more implied than anything else. It's not trying to shock anyone, this is just the harshness of the reality of this world. So this is where we see what the original professor went through. It was believed that he killed the 10 students, but it was actually Dumbledore. What an asshole. The professor was able to trap Dumbledore in a ghost trap, but we kinda let him go when we opened it up again. After this, I went downstairs to see what else was needed to do, and oh, nobody's at the desk? Ah, fuck! The door to the theatre is open, and we can finally confront Hawksmoor. We find him in the theatre quoting Macbeth. Whilst the exchange here is kind of funny, I do wonder why Lazarus doesn't just shoot the cunt.
Ah, an audience at last. Methought I heard a voice cry, "Sleep no more! Macbeth doth murder sleep." Is this a dagger
No, it's a Glock 17. Police issue.
Thou canst not say I did it. Never shake thy gory locks at me.
Take your tights off, worm boy. You've lost your audience. Unless you hadn't noticed.
Caviar to pigs, I'm feeling. I shall succumb to the spirit of Barnum and Bailey. Give them what they want to see.
Steal! Steal!
She cannot hear you, cretin. Well, well. Have you enjoyed yourself chasing up and down, firing pop guns at my little troop of pets?
Cut the crap, hogface! I don't care how many times you've died on your ass before, I'm taking you down!
You intend to arrest a ghost?
Whatever. I know what you did in this school 2 years ago, and all that's real.
That is real. What do you plan to do about that? To be continued, no doubt, ladies and gentlemen.
There's not really anything stopping him, and getting a head start would be advantageous. When the fight starts, he's holding Anna, so you can't shoot him. It's a shame I didn't have a minute to shoot him when he didn't have a hostage. Oh well. So this is where Computer Boy explains that he draws power from the ghosts, and that capturing more ghosts makes him stronger. I do find this to be a rather cool reason that you have to go out and hunt ghosts, and can't just go after the main bad guy directly. Initially he lied to us, so we'd go to a place with ghosts in it and capture them. Then we came back and he's got enough ghosts to control more of the school. Now he needs enough ghosts to calculate where Dumbledore has gone, sending Lazarus on the Professor's trail to capture more ghosts and learn more about his predecessor's path. The story to this game is pretty solid for the most part, though it feels a little rushed towards the end like I said before. We are then treated to a scene where Dumbledore speaks to the Parliament. What is the Parliament? Who the fuck knows? A Parliament of ghosts or something, and I imagine this might have been explained in a sequel, if there ever was one. However, I don't entirely mind that we don't know. Maybe they're like the ideal masters from Skyrim, an entity that succeeded death, and now it's masters. Or maybe they're just a bunch of bitchy ghosts who run the show, who knows. I feel the possibility of there being mysteries, even when everything in the world that is currently a mystery has been explained on some level, is actually a cool prospect for a video game about the supernatural. There's layers to this shit, and I do enjoy that. My problem with this scene is that there's no real reason for Hawksmoor to be talking to these guys. They talk in circles and do their best to have a conversation without establishing anything, but then constantly clumsily spew out exposition all the time. The acting is fine and the dialogue isn't too bad within and of itself, but what's actually being said is basically fucking nothing. There's nothing being established other than vague mentions of oblivion, which I'm assuming is a state in which a ghost vanishes from existence. Dialogue should serve a purpose, and if it doesn't, it's just annoying at best and a waste of time at worst, or hell, it might even be detrimental to the story you're trying to tell. I feel like it's a decent point to start establishing things, but I'm suspicious that there isn't much to establish with these guys. The overall plot, at least as far as the main villain goes, is very flimsy. His motivation isn't very clear, and the role of the Parliament isn't well established. All to keep up a mystery that'll never really be solved. From what I gather, Hawksmoor and these guys want to be ghosts forever, because they're always at risk that one day they will be claimed by oblivion. It's later said that all ghosts fade in the end, that over time their physical form just ceases to exist. However, I don't know if that would apply to these guys because they've been around for basically ever, but maybe it is just a risk they want to get rid of entirely, like vampires with sunlight.
Do not be alarmed. We are unforgiving, but we are with you.
You still have the captive?
Naturally, we have the captive. We are ever watchful.
The next mission is the World War II battleship, and it's quite interesting as a level, but it somewhat lacks the attention to detail that the Swamps had. However, it is shorter, much shorter, so I do like that aspect a bit. The puzzles are nowhere near as annoying either, which is also kinda nice. I very quickly find a tank.
Tanks. Oh, tank. Look at these tanks. Damn, look at these tanks.
After blowing up a doorway, a bunch of these ghost soldiers come out, so I blew them up as well. Damn, who knew that the ultimate weakness of ghosts was a tank? I do like the idea of a ghost ship which features a never-ending World War II battle, a battle that has transcended its initial purpose into the afterlife. This is one of the things that I find kind of annoying, where the astral mode requires you to move something. Now, for a start, you only use 2 of the astral powers at this point. And hell, I don't even know if you use that many. I think it could even be 1 and I'm just remembering it as 2. There's so many options and the puzzle is always solved using the same one. It's like having a bunch of shapes in your inventory but there's always a round hole. It just makes you sad, you never get to use the triangle. But also, I don't like how you lose energy as you basically equip the form. You equip the form and take a sudden change in your appearance or sometimes in the way that your character interacts with the world. And you can sometimes waste huge amounts of energy because of this, because you're trying to just get into position. There's no advantage to it, but the game ticks off energy every second. So the longer you spend getting into position and doing the thing, the less of a chance you have of succeeding because you'll have less time to do it in. Sometimes you can get stuck or not be able to work out where you need to stand or how to interact with something, and you just watch your energy tick away. Every second that Astra has taken on this ghost form, she loses energy just by being in it. So every second that you are in this, it's basically just ticking down to the point where you can't use it anymore and Astra becomes basically useless. You have to leave astral mode, kill a few rats to get more energy, and then jump back in. It's a kind of annoying addition to the game, and I just honestly don't see the point in the energy system at all. It's not like there would be any advantage to just permanently staying as one of these differing kinds of ghosts. If anything, I think the game would be a bit more fun, and it's not like you could beat the puzzles any easier. I'm also not a huge fan of the UI for the meter here. It looks like, I don't know, something I could make on a video editor. I feel like a border around it or something of that nature would make it look significantly better. I then have to fight a ghost in a kitchen again. I love the detailing here, and whilst the setting is a bit more limiting than the swamp and the haunted house, it is still doing a great job with what little they have. I do kind of appreciate this scene where Lazarus expresses his doubt about capturing World War II veterans inside his ghost trap, who were allied to the United States and just generally to the good side in general. World War II as a conflict was pretty black and white, and capturing these guys just feels like you are capturing the good guys. The computer has a quite cold, logical and pragmatic view of things and scolds him for it. But interestingly, Lazarus is actually kind of right, both now and later on when you actually find out that these are the good guys even in death. So we then encounter this creature. It reminds me of that green thing from Half-Life as it does something similar, except this version can even grab ghosts and pull them down into the bowels of the ship. It is pretty good how there's a sea monster in this, brought upon us by an evil World War II villain who apparently used the conflict to birth it. It's a story akin to the U88 or the E88 stories, which involves World War II battleships and submarines going missing and being blamed on sea monsters and other supernatural shit. So we encounter a headless general of the British Army, who is only just not British enough to be considered for a Call of Duty game at the time. Yes, all British people turn into Fowler from Chicken Run the second they join the army.
In the old crate and tally-ho! Tucks away!
Give over, you old fool. They just want to count us.
Oh, how dare you talk back to a senior ranking officer?
It's just in our DNA, what can I say? He explains that the Dagger of Poseidon is the thing that caused all of the trouble. Apparently it's cursed so that bad shit happens when you take it to sea. So they took it to sea. So he tells me that he's going to call off the enemy soldiers, only to then get snatched up by the beast monster. You think Lazarus could do more than just stand there like an idiot, but apparently not. I was pleasantly surprised at the use of letters and stuff for the exposition. It wasn't too badly implemented, but stuff like Fallout 76 and Everyone's Gone to the Rapture kinda puts me off such a thing. I mean, the first year, all you had in Fallout 76 was letters and voice recordings to tell you that something cool did happen here, but now it's over. You have to navigate the lower decks of the ship as tentacles of the sea monster attack this place. I quite like it as a concept, it's very engaging and it adds a new layer of tension as you avoid an unbeatable foe and have to find a way around it. The bad thing is that being grabbed doesn't really do much. You lose health, sure, but it can happen a dozen times without losing your life, and there's no long-term repercussions of being grabbed, so it's at best a very minor annoyance. We have to blow the tentacles up with TNT, which we have to find ourselves. Fucking pain in the ass. I rinse and repeat for a bit until I actually find the headless corpse of the captain. Yikes. Nasty way for him to go. Then his soul got eaten by the Kraken. Well, so I thought at the time. We find another journal piece that sheds some light on the situation, which is pretty cool. We then summon our astral projection to move forward and set up explosives to blow up the Kraken, so we can move deeper into the ship and fight the heart of the beast, or the closest thing. So, this is where I get kind of fucked over playing the PAL version. In the NTSC walkthrough I have, this ladder is just a straight monkey bar across the abyss, but in the PAL version, a chunk of it is missing and you have to figure out how to get around. To do this, you have to shimmy along the side. This took me a wee bit to figure out because this honestly was not a thing I needed to know before this point. Like, I think it was in the tutorial 7 fucking hours ago, but it could have not been for all I can remember. I didn't remember and it didn't really matter. If I tell you 7 hours ago a random colour, are you to blame for not remembering? Never mind a year or two later. I then detonate this thing and blow up the monster, which is pretty cool, not gonna lie. We send Astral deeper into the ship to open the way, and an interesting thing happens where it plays a cutscene where Dumbledore and Officer Steele talk about things. Dumbledore has a creepy boner for Astra and kind of a half chub for Lazarus. Anna tries to bargain for Lazarus's life, but Dumbledore doesn't need her. He needs Lazarus and his ability to channel Astra. However, he promises to return Anna to him after he reaches Dumbledore. You have to turn into the, well, heavy boy, because you don't use any of the others at this point in the game. Because, well, why would you use the other fucking 5 you've accumulated at this point? And shut the door. This cuts off the water to this part of the ship, and opens the way for Lazarus. We then find this Bioshock audio recording of the crew member, who talks about how the beast came back after so many days due to Lazarus releasing it from the ghost machine. So then I have to fight more soldiers who have no idea that I'm on their side. I manage to finally get to the next area and confront the idiot soldiers to tell them that I'm on their side, and I'm reunited with the head honcho himself, Colonel Fortescue. He explains that his body is holding all of the explosives and we have to guide it to the door and blow it up, because it doesn't have a head so it can't really think. I also have to do this pain in the ass puzzle to help this one headless dude blow up a door so I can move forward. After losing half of my hair from hair pulling and half a finger to finger biting due to stress and frustration, I finally achieve it. I'm putting this on my fucking CV. This was a pain. At the heart of the ship, we find the monster and it looks weird and creepy. I kind of like it. It's kind of like a demonic space mutant baby. Can't say I've seen anything like it before. It is truly a unique and beautiful specimen. Well, time to blow it up. So we have to lure it out by shooting at it and getting its attention. Well, I thought that, but it doesn't give that much of a shit, so I guess on to plan B. Run off in this direction and look for the dagger of Poseidon, which is like its pride and joy. So I run off with it and lure it to the ballroom so that Captain Neck can blow it up. So I go further into the ship and free zombie Luigi here. He whacks the machine with his wrench, and I unleash Astra, who frees the other zombie Luigis. After freeing Mama Luigi, Gay Luigi, and the other one, I finally was able to grind this thing's balls in a vice. Then the evil boy steps out of the monster, and I do kind of like how this works, though I do wonder how him getting his balls stuck in a vice activates his powers. Like, that sounds like an awful way to be a superhero. In the ballroom, you're forced to keep this guy busy until Colonel Fortescue can trap him. Then the devs play, how can we get Professor Mercurius into trouble with YouTube again by lingering on statue boobs? Seriously, I once got into trouble for a thumbnail that had featured fully covered breasts, so I'm not risking it. Sorry guys, no stone boobs for you. Oh, hello! So, I did really enjoy this boss fight. The creature falls through the floor and has a real impact on the environment around it, which I honestly think enhances any boss fight. After this period, towards the late 2000s and early 2010s, a lot of boss fights just became meatier enemies that took more bullets rather than a major obstacle to overcome. So, you have to shoot the tank shell that's lodged in the creature. It's akin to that boss fight in Time Splitter's Future Perfect that did something similar with a gas canister. After it explodes, you capture the creature's soul, which can be a bitch to do, but it is doable after you know what you're doing. Fortescue wants the honour of capturing this guy himself, one that I'd happily grant him regardless, but I did wonder if an adverse effect might come from a ghost wielding a ghost trap.
Wait, Jones! This blighter's mine, if you don't mind. I'll do the honours.
I do like that he fucking misses and this dude has to waddle over, pick it up and bring it back. It's a nice touch and a pretty good comedic moment.
Well, no point in kicking our heels around here anymore. Chance to meet all the Fortescue ancestors. If you don't mind giving us the old heave-ho, Jones. That's an order, sir.
Whatever.
Then, attention!
Go on, Taff. Let us off this ship for God's sake.
Actually, one last thing.
Returning here, Lazarus just goes to the next place and there's no further interaction with the school. It's at this point going forward that there's no further exploration element in the school and you can't view the Ghost Finder thing at all. So it was nice whilst it lasted, I guess. So Dumbledore has a chat with Pinhead in the mirror and Pinhead explains that he's setting something up and I'm walking into a trap of some kind. The next level is an abandoned prison, which kind of reminds me of the one from Ghostbusters' Ghost Hunting series, only this one is actually haunted. You get attacked by ghostly prison guards that are very similar to the Swamp Boys from the first level. There's some cool detailing in this level, like the warehouse with crates and a dead shark. It's very well textured and well detailed, however the intimacy of the first stage, it's long gone, I'm afraid. We go to this room where the radio is present, playing an interview with the warden, where he brags about the prison not being escapable, and it's implied that the warden went down a dark path of his own, becoming a bigger tyrant and obsessed with keeping prisoners locked in. I thought this might mean that the warden is the big bad boss at the end, but it's not. Would have been a cool take on the idea, admittedly. We find a note in the sewers that suggests we later get to possess guards, like some psyops mechanic, which is a really cool concept, and later reveals itself to be decently implemented, albeit it's not ideal, but it's pretty good. I like to get my hands on this tool and possess a ghoul guard, and I absolutely love being able to do this in games. Sadly, it's a bit limited and restricted to this level and to certain NPCs, so you can perform certain actions, but not much else. But hey, it's a cool feature, and it's pretty good that the game's still giving you cool stuff to play with late in the game. One of the issues that I have, though, is that it's only really used in this level, and by the next level it just sort of isn't there anymore, like everything else. This game really does feel like they had big plans at the start, probably making use of multiple ghost forms and shit to solve puzzles and multiple larger levels to explore, and you end up just whizzing through the last few levels, only using one ghost power per level. So the enemies that you actually possess are these miners, so you can destroy a minecart track and cause it to crash into a system below, opening up the floodgates into the other room. I kind of like this, but at the same time I'm kind of sad that the only thing you can do is possess some stationary dudes with drills. Like, I don't get to shoot people as a ghost or, you know, play out the part of the person I possessed. I just mine. That's kind of sad. This abandoned prison segment is actually really well done, as it has some very creepy auras to it. I felt it really captured everything about the place well. Prisons are awful places to be even when they're not haunted, and the idea that this is a place that encapsulates so many awful things happening at once is actually quite a fun idea to explore, especially in a horror game. You can hear the voices of convicts long since gone as ambient noise, and there's an infirmary full of bloodstained curtains, all lit by this grim greenish grey hue. I like this level a lot more than the ship level, if I'm being honest, as I feel it has some really strong atmosphere. I feel like the ship level has a stronger story to it. However, the warden and the convict are details that can be picked up on a little more, as it's gradually told through the environment instead of just finding notes that say this happened today or that happened today like on the ship level. However, overall presence wise, they don't amount to Fortescue and the Kraken and the dude who is the Kraken from the previous mission. They just sort of exist in some obscure, vague way. But they don't actually impact the level until the very end. And even then, only one convict is actually seen in this entire level, and the rest just sort of existed a long ass time ago. I love this bit where these guys come out of the morgue to attack you, but I do wonder why all of the dead folks here are prison guards. Were they that shit at their job that they got killed by the convicts who seemingly suffered a few, if any, casualties? I feel a lore tidbit that convicts who die in the prison spend the afterlife as guard ghosts actually could have done a lot for this, because I feel like that would offer a good cop-out for the lack of model diversity and add a creepy layer to the setting, since the prisoners can't seem to escape this nightmare even in death. Alternatively, maybe the guards hated the inmates so much that they weren't able to let it go and just had to stay here in the afterlife, whereas the convicts just didn't seem to share that hatred for the guards and just went on into their next dimension. I don't know, there's a lot of spitballing you could do for these levels, and I do appreciate that in the game you actually are able to think about what everything could mean, as opposed to just thinking, well, that happened, next. You eventually battle your way inside here, which reminds me of the police station from Resident Evil 2. There's a pretty dark puzzle involving a visiting window phone in which you have to hear the full story of this woman before, well, an item appears. The story told is that of a wife who is trying to be supportive of her cop husband, who is slowly losing it and eventually murders her.
Hey, take it easy, honey. I know a cop's life can be hard, but come on. Frank, are you all right? What's the matter with you? Frank! No, don't! Please! What are you doing?
Upon hearing the whole story, you are left with a flower, a parting gift from a dutiful wife murdered by her husband. This opens up the way to the next part of the prison. So this is where you use Astra's possession ability to control prison guards and make them open the way for you. This is such a cool concept which could only be improved by slightly better controls that you could barely get on the PS2. I don't mean like the button prompts and stuff like that, I mean like the fluidity of the controls and the movement. This sort of era was not very good for that. Even at its best, it still felt jank compared to 5 years down the line. And by 10 years later, it was like a memory that games were like this. But for a brief time, games felt more modern. but were held back by janky PS1 era movement controls. Still, I did enjoy using different ghost types to clear the path forward, even if I did fuck it all up at one point and had to do the entire thing again. I love this bit, which sets up quite an intense fight later down the line. You move on to death row and have to tell the story of the inmate on death row in order to have access to him. As you put the rose from earlier in a vase, you're transported to an alternate version of the prison where you find the murdered wife and discover the existence of a surviving child, a daughter. You then go to a cell with a doll's house in it, and inside the doll's house you place a bride statue you have to find in one of the other cells. I really do like this idea of having to build up a ghost's life and understand it before capturing the ghost. It's an interesting concept for a ghost game, and it gives the ghost more of a character to explore, and every level has like a unique feeling because of it. I placed a photo in the photo frame in one of the cells, and it opened the way to the apartment again. In this version of the apartment, the police had taken the wife away and left the daughter all alone just sobbing in her bed. Which is a bit fucked up, but hey, it was the 50s, so I believe it. Wait, no it wasn't, there's a boombox behind her. So this was what, the 80s? 90s? Early 80s at the earliest. Fuck, man.
Where's Mommy? Where's Mommy?
Well, here's some of Mommy over here, and some over there. Some on the ceiling, and I think I walked some of her in on the carpet. Oh, my bad. So after returning to the cell with the rose, I have access to another version of the house. In this version, I can find a teddy bear which I can give to the poor girl to shut her up and stop her from bitching. Oh, she was holding out on me, little punk. She had a teddy bear on her shelf and a cuddly David Cameron. Why the fuck did she need the one that I had to loot from a crime scene? Placing the bride at the house shows the final moments of the condemned, where you splice between him and yourself. It's really cool, especially given how much you learn about him, that you actually start to become him because of the supernatural presence around you. I feel like a few more components added to this setup would create a cool duality situation that could work very well, both story-wise and gameplay-wise, at least for this segment of the game. You then go to the electric chair and face your final judgment as Aglin. I love the exchange here, even if it is a bit uneven and shifts in tone as far as the cop goes. Maybe that was the point, given that he was allegedly possessed and he did the crime, but I can't help but feel like his bafflement at the concept of remorse kind of dichotomizes his character and his motivations in a way that's not really very believable.
Son, we don't do fancy last meals in Devil's Scar. Priest right outside. He'll follow me in.
It's my daughter I want to see, Ward, not you.
No visitors allowed. You've got me and then the priest. Make the most of it.
Is she alive? My little girl? At least tell me that.
Like you care. If you hadn't gone on your little bonfire adventure, she'd be alive. No question about it, son. What I've come to ask is this. Do you feel remorse?
Oh, yeah. No one's felt a pain like this. Remorse? You call it? Oh, yeah.
Then let me ask you this. Why did you do it? Why did you do it, Aglin?
I thought about nothing else, and I can't tell you. I don't know what possessed me.
Just think me what possessed me. How a police officer could care so little about human life, I just don't know. So, Aglin, I can't say I feel sorry for you, but on behalf of your fellow officers, all public servants, prison staff, true patriots, and all Americans, all I can say is this. You make me sick, and I hope you burn in hell.
It's here that you finally meet the professor. They argue, but it's brought to a halt as the electric chair prisoner materializes. Given that he died by the chair, he returns to life as a ghost with electrical powers. Thank you, US Department of Corrections, you stupid fucking assholes. How many times you've dipped me over now? Oh, it's just once. Well, fuck you anyway. You have to bring Sparky here through the cells and he opens them all up. Those big bastards who were a hair away from killing you before are unleashed, and you have to fight them all off to go to the next area, which is a generator room. You have to fuck up the generators so he can't use them, and now he's trapped here, and there's no way to charge himself up. You can defeat him and trap him with the ghost trap now. You get out of the prison and finally hash it out in this junkyard, which feels a little out of place on an Alcatraz-like island admittedly, but whatever. They bring up a few interesting plot points here, one being that Hawksmoor wants Astra, but even the Professor doesn't know why, and that Hawksmoor was the one who drove that guy to kill his wife. So he could recreate the perfect conditions to create such a powerful electrical ghost. You actually hear Hawksmoor talk over the bit where you're going to the electric chair, so this was kind of foreshadowed but not fully explained or confirmed. I do like that as a bit of storytelling, it's pretty well implemented. So, you do some busy work in this junkyard to find a way out. There's a cool boss fight with a poltergeist that makes an armor out of junk, but aside from this element of the level, it feels very rigidly linear, there's not much detail or mystery to explore, and if we count this as its own area, as brief as it is, it's fair enough to do though, because it has its own themes and everything else. It's the weakest of the areas to explore, definitely weaker than the prison before it, that's for sure. I do appreciate some of the banter between Lazarus and the Professor in this part of the game. Some of it legitimately made me laugh and was quite relatable.
Seems quiet.
Are you gonna say it or am I?
Too quiet.
You were saying, Lazarus?
This doesn't look good. No. I mean, I'm all for recycling, but, yeah. Any ideas? No. Not even a name like, Maximus Hepus Objunctus? No. You don't say much when you're nervous, do you? Because I'm quite the opposite. I talk. Have you noticed that?
Yes? You want me to deal with this one?
No, don't worry. I'm on a roll.
Use the goggles!
There's a cool boss fight at the end where this giant junk monster comes back and you have to stand off at the lighthouse. It's a cool finale to the level and I do approve. I love that this level ends with Lazarus filling him in that the librarian is going to be pissed at him, and then he proudly adds that he was a monitor for the library. I don't know why, but that did tickle me. Just Rob Paulson's delivery is brilliant. He sounds genuinely so proud.
You know, where we're heading, it's gonna be kind of weird seeing you next to Mr. Computerhead.
Oh yes, quite.
And there's a librarian who is gonna skin you alive. Big fines, man. You mistreated her books. I was a monitor.
As you get back to the base, the Professor expresses his concern that the next area, the military base, is something that he fears is more than anything that's come before it. You're about to enter a dark chapter of his life, a personal failing of his, and one that he doesn't think he can overcome. So the Professor explained that he worked out this military base out of Arizona. It makes reference to a Project Sunstreak, which I looked up, and it's actually a thing. It was a research endeavor which basically looked into using psychics and astral projections to see battlefields, access enemy intelligence, and perhaps even possess enemy soldiers. It's very reminiscent of what the Sorrow did in Metal Gear Solid. If anyone's played Metal Gear Solid 3, they were trying to create soldiers akin to that, I get the impression. Maybe with a bit of Psycho Mantis sprinkled in there as well. They wanted to work out if such a thing was possible so that they could get ahead of it, tactically, and also to see if they could do it themselves so they could get ahead of it themselves in terms of the offensive. It's a fascinating read, and terrifyingly, the people they used for the experiment were allegedly able to see things that they weren't able to physically see, and described it so accurately, and allegedly even exposed a marijuana import through doing so. But in the end, it didn't work out as it is, well... I'll be diplomatic and say it's a bit of a high concept. As a result, it just didn't seem like it was provable to be real. It was a science monitoring something that couldn't really be explained, and in the world of research and R&D, that's not very useful. Like, yeah, there was probably situations where it happened, but could they explain why and how it happened? Not really, so it might as well not have happened in that case. He explains that his ghost hunting research was in response to this, the idea that they could use ghosts like Astral to monitor the enemy in similar ways, maybe do some other stuff that was on the table. Astral ended up being the thing that they wanted to create all those years ago with Sunstreak, albeit not quite in the way that they anticipated. You work your way through this futuristic military base. It's a unique level as you're told the story by a companion rather than having to uncover data or find the story through ghosts. There is an element of that, but it's just side bits that you can also figure out. It's not the main focus of the story. This is a cool change to the concept, and I do like how the opening of the level jokes that Lazarus points out that he's been treating this as a monster scarefest when it's a government conspiracy thriller, and he would have been a bit more moody with his attitude to adjust had he known. It's then you realise that this is actually what the Professor is, and you can see why they had such conflict at the start of their relationship. For Lazarus, this is a dumb fun adventure. He accidentally stumbled into this and has just been taking it on the chin. For the Professor, this is his life's work, and this whole thing is a redemption arc in a web of lies and conspiracies that he's just sunk into and will never be able to leave. Both irk the other because of how seriously they take the situation. In the Professor's case, he takes it too seriously in Lazarus's eyes, but from the Professor's perspective, this is his world, and Lazarus not taking it seriously enough actually gets to him. I love this dynamic between these two characters, it works so well. However, introducing Lazarus to the fray is somewhat of a tactical advantage as he isn't weighed down by the burdens of guilt or investment. It's not that he doesn't take things seriously on any level, he has stakes in this too, but he isn't too bogged down in the details and he's not too concerned with what ifs like someone who's been in it for too long would. He doesn't feel the gravity that much that it's pulling him down. So he's actually a lot lighter in his step, which is an advantage in an environment like this. In this scene we arrive at Professor Richmond's office and he explains a bit more about his research and how a lot of this shit came to be. I noticed Lazarus point out the Professor is wearing flares. At least I think that's what he's implying, but that doesn't seem to be the case. I think this camera footage was supposed to show the Professor 20 or so years ago, in the 70s, and the animators didn't get the memo and just put him in as his normal model. This happens a fair bit in cartoons, like how Michelangelo once turned up with pies instead of pizzas in an episode of Ninja Turtles, and how Waylon Smithers was a black man with blue hair for his first appearance in The Simpsons. Richmond explains that Hawksmoor was one of the ghosts that they were studying but grew too influential and smart for his own good, even going as far as to make deals and offering alliances with the US military. Richmond implies that he sabotaged the project to prevent an alliance with such an evil entity from transpiring. You descend into the basement where Dumbledore himself waits for you, and the Professor kind of drops his little heel turn, taking your equipment away and handing you over. His fear has gotten the better of him and became the thing that he ran away from all those years ago. He handed you and Astral over to Hawksmoor in exchange for his own pathetic existence. I thought this was some sort of trick at first, like he was planning on using this as an opportunity to ambush Hawksmoor and kill him later or something. But no, he legit just flat out betrays you. Astral is ripped from Lazarus's body and Hawksmoor gets his partner Anna to shoot him. Dumbledore gives a legitimately terrifying speech about how death feels, and I do love the depth of this writing. It's very good. There are some parts of this game which are a bit clumsy, but then it always makes up for it with some bits like this which are just so strong. It really plays into that impending feeling of doom that is relatable in several points in life, but never as much as it is in life's end. Everyone likely dies thinking, well, maybe there's a way out of this.
Look at you, searching for escape. Even now you're thinking, my gun, my weapons, my friends, there must be a way. There is no way. You see, this is the moment the living wake, when they realize there's no one to pull them from the burning car, or save them from the stranger with the sparkling blade, the moment I love. Squandered lives, thinking there's always tomorrow, there's always a way. And then the fear as the blade sinks in, the fire burns, the bullet hits me.
All very poetic, but what is it you actually want?
Huh. You're keen, aren't you? Keep him talking, keep thinking. I've taken what I want from you, the chosen one, and with her I'm taking life. And the ghosts you've captured from them, I'm taking power.
Steel! Steele!
I've lived off these moments for 100 years. This is the version I know of the storm before the drought.
Steele!
Your fate is in your partner's hands. I promise you to her.
But you're controlling her.
Am I? Well, that's not very sporting.
Lazarus!
Steele, don't do it. Keep thinking. Think for yourself. Just keep thinking, okay? Throw me your gun. He's in here somewhere. Quickly, throw me your gun. No, Steele!
You're gunned down and the game goes back to the main menu, which was a common thing at the time to have a fake game over screen, usually as a joke or some way to make you think, oh no, the game had a bummer ending. However, not everyone is a dick in this universe, and the computer possesses a mechanical super mecha robot, which is a thing now, and decides to do the professor's job for him. He turns on the professor, proclaiming that he's a stupid asshole and he betrayed everything. I do like this dialogue and the dynamic between them, even if it's short-lived. This is the first time we see them together, and it's probably one of the few times we see them together.
Well, aren't you resourceful? It is strange to meet one's maker. Stranger still to find that he is worthless. What do you want? From you? I want nothing. You're nothing. Nothing but a bug-ridden replica. Affirmative. You are the man. I the reflection. Yet it is you that has betrayed everything. Shut up! Everything I was built for. Everything you stood for. No human could have endured what I went through. The voices, the darkness, the torture. No programming will help you understand any of that. I simply couldn't take anymore. Analyzing. Self-justification. Self-pity. Fact. You led Officer Jones to his death. Incontestable inference. You are a murderer. Wait. Where are you going? You have to get me out of here. Officer Jones may be dead, but his mission is alive. No, come back. You have to help me. I made you. You can help me escape. If I had a master, he is dead. Goodbye, Professor. It has been disappointing. Wait!
So, the bit after this emotionally charged chapter in the story follows with a lot of stomping around. Not gonna lie, 5 minutes of this, it's less impressive than it was at first. I mean, he could have just walked over to the window at the end of the cutscene. Wouldn't have really taken away from anything. He uses the machine to astrally project Lazarus out of his body and he flies around in ghost form. You then switch back to playing as Lazarus, now in astral form, and you have to navigate the maze. It's cool, but a pain in the ass, so I got lost so many fucking times and I didn't exactly know where I was supposed to go. A form of internal monologue telling me where the hell I need to go might have been very prudent and helpful here. Oh look, it's Richmond! Now I get to haunt his ass. Woo! I find Digital Derek after 4 years of playing Pipe Dream, and he tries to murder me. Charming. Fucking charming. We find Astral, and Digital Derek explains that he can be returned to his physical form, and explains how few, if any, ghosts live longer than a few centuries. Hawksmoor is a very rare exception. Some live as long as possible in a form of purgatory, floating around nearby humans and not being able to interact with them in any meaningful way. It's kind of a depressing realization that this grim fate awaited so many people. I do wonder, probably for my own lack of comprehension, because I'm a doofus, how people turn into the other kinds of monstrous ghosts we've seen. Dumbledore realizes what's going on and attacks our big robot friend, throwing him down a large shaft as we return to life and thus begin the awesome boss fight. Of course, Professor Dickless is back to save the day. I still fucking hate you, prick. You shoot Hawksmoor enough and this brings down the machine around you, and Dumbledore just flops down into the abyss. Brilliant. Professor Useless and RoboFlop realize that they can basically nuke the base with a zero bomb, which was established as a thing earlier, destroying the ghosts in the process. Apparently Lazarus has the spirit of the ghost girl in his head, but not the body. Like, okay, so she just lives in his head now. Great. Lazarus and Steele escape, and they then talk about the shit that they were going to say to explain the fact that they've been missing for the best part of the week. It ends on a pretty funny bit of banter, and we fade to the night sky as we put the world of Ghosthunter to rest for now. Probably forever, actually. There are some things that were left open for a possible sequel, but it just didn't happen. I feel like Ghosthunter wasn't likely to reach mass market appeal, and one of the big reasons was that I honestly don't know who was the target audience. As a kid, I thought it was an adult game, and it does have a lot of dark themes to it. However, at the same time, I could totally see an adult seeing some monster designs in this and the promo material, like the prominently featured teddy bear one, and assuming that this was made for younger audiences. By no means would I say that either perspectives are spot on, and I think an ideal audience member would be a teenager in their mid-teens. I also imagine that a lot of people who played this back in the day didn't finish it. It's really difficult without a guide in so many areas because of navigation being a pain in the ass, and some of the puzzles not being very obvious at the time. There's even a regional difference between the versions of the game. On top of all of that, it's one hell of a time sink, and it does feel like you're going around in circles a lot of that time. A near flawless run that I saw was achieved in 8 hours. Mine was around 12, at least according to the footage counter in my video editor. Whilst there's nothing wrong with that, within and of itself, I did wonder when this was going to end, but overall I did enjoy Ghosthunter. It's a very well made game which visually still holds up to this day. It has some genuinely good comedic writing and some great dark horror elements, without going ridiculous or over the top, and it has some really good acting talent behind the cast. Just overall as a game, it holds up in many ways. It's a bit stiff and jank in some departments, such as aiming and moving whilst firing, and it does feel like an interesting hybrid of horror games that you would have got before Resident Evil 4, where they hadn't quite worked out the formula yet. I'd very much like this game to be given a second life on modern systems, maybe with a touch-up to get the best out of it from all 3 of the releases. I don't feel the graphics need upgrading, but maybe they could be upscaled to look a bit more impressive on bigger television screens. The game looks good on my emulator recording, but I imagine this wouldn't be the case with an actual television, especially not a big screen one, like the one that I play my PS5 games on, for instance. This would be a good place for the PlayStation streaming service to come in, but sadly the emulator kicks the shit out of that in every aspect, as I mentioned in the ICO review the other year. Regardless of how you play it, I'd recommend this as a game to anyone who finds appeal in it. It's an enjoyable horror game that's a nice little window to its era and offers hours of well-refined content.
Freaking curious about pushing.
Professor Curious Man, it's me. The Giga Chad you once knew as Andy Velasco. You thought death would stop my reign of terror, but alas, death is only a stepping stone for the likes of me. I can do so many things now that I am a spirit. I can move without a wheelchair. I can talk without a little stutter. And I can also shit myself without having to rely on mommy and daddy wiping my ass. And now that I have returned, I have plans. Geek plans. First off, I am going to possess that man's body. And when I do, I am going to get the Lady Domingos to fall in love with me. And then, shortly before we are to be married, I am going to molest a toucan in front of her. And watch as she cries and cries in front of me. And then after that, I am going to possess the body of Geej the Doom Guy. And then one day I'm going to break into an elementary school and I'm going to run around naked, thereby destroying the evil conservatives' legacy. And then I will inhabit the body of Joe Biden. And the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to pardon Amos Yee and all pedosexuals. And then we will build, I will have them build a gigantic statue to honor me. And I guess that's, but me. And I will have Ronnie Vane become my vice president, and then we will take over the world, and we will usher in the dawn of a glorious pedosexual empire, and there's nothing you can do to stop me, you conservative.